60 years yesterday since Tanzania became independent, an important country on our continent. It's had several difficult years. Their former president, John Magufuli, denied the existence of COVID-19 before he then passed away. We're joined now by Tshepo Ikaneng, an Africa International Relations media strategist and researcher. Tshepo, good afternoon to you. Really do appreciate the time. Thank you. I mean, Tanzania, like many countries on our continent over COVID, has had a difficult few years. John Magufuli was accused of authoritarianism. He denied the existence of COVID. And then he passed away. There must be major challenges now for the president who's taken over.
Yes, most definitely, Steve. I mean, we must say that we must acknowledge the role that Tanzania has played in terms of the liberation movements in the continent itself as a whole, including the role that the country's presidents did, especially Julius Mwalimu Nyerere, in terms of hosting all liberation movements. You talk about the ANC, the APLA, and other liberation fronts, whether it's from Namibia, from Mozambique, Angola, and then including the SADC region, including Zimbabwe itself. So they remain a country that we know that has a repository of knowledge of leadership in Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. But we know that obviously there's been a lot of developments that have come and gone, and with the leaders that came before him, and during his tenure after Benjamin Mkapa, and then now Magufuli, and then talking about the first woman president of Tanzania, Hassan, who also are very credible in their own right in terms of driving the rich history of that country as one of those that has really set the tone in terms of the drive to drive African unity. So besides other things that are pressing up, like we're talking about COVID-19, and then what the former president and now his sole recipes, Professor Dr. Magufuli, we can talk a lot about the role that they played in terms of the liberation struggle, but Tanzania remains a very important ally of South Africa itself in the present context.
I mean, so often what these things boil down to is the economy. And I mean, you look at unemployment figures, you look at all sorts of ways to measure the economy. Is there sort of economic development taking place at the moment? Do people feel their lives are getting better? And I suppose, Tshepo, I mean, the question is complicated by COVID, because no one feels their life is getting better under COVID.
Most definitely. I mean, the former president Magufuli was very stringent. Remember that there was a crisis of diplomatic crisis, really, when he really spoke out against China, as his predecessors, Mkapa and Kikwete, who really introduced the Chinese to invest heavily in infrastructure development projects in Tanzania, including most of Africa, obviously, in the past decade or so. And then he said, no, I'm going to cancel those contracts. And then that really drew an ire of the Chinese, as you are well aware, that they are very much strong diplomatically. And then there were rumors as to whether he was very strong-armed in terms of resisting the Chinese invasion, so-called invasion into the Tanzanian market. And most of all, like he wanted to promote the intra-Africa trade. As you are well aware, he never traveled out of Tanzania, except to go to maybe Uganda and neighboring states in East Africa, which is a very key strategic investment area for the rest of Africa. So he was one of the people who just mentioned that he was Machiavellian. You can argue that either way, but he was very much a person that wanted Africa to own its resources and to promote what we call now as development, intra-Africa trade. But whether you judge his legacy positively or negatively, it depends on everybody else. But he was a man of his word, and he ruffled many feathers in the diplomatic circles, both in the continent and abroad. But for now, we can say safely that her predecessor, the first African woman president of Tanzania, President Hassan, has also took the mantle to very much to the dismay of the opposition, to say that he is perpetuating the legacy of the former President Magufuli in terms of maybe being very critical of his critics, jailing them, including the press. We know that there are issues related to media freedom. So the story of Tanzania will go a long way, but it's really a development that we need to look up closely. And as we know that what is happening in Ethiopia, whether it's in the Sudan crisis, in Kenya, in the Horn of Africa, people are looking up for Tanzania's leadership in terms of the role that they've played over years in terms of making sure that Africa's own development takes hold.
Tanzania's unemployment rate's around 2%. I mean, our unemployment rate is so much higher than that. I mean, how have they been able to grow their economy and have such a low unemployment rate? I mean, that clearly would seem to show that something's working. People may not be earning as much money as they would like, but still, that's a very low unemployment rate.
Steve, remember that Tanzania's founding fathers, including Nyerere himself, you talk about Umoja, Ujama, Harambee. I mean, they were very much, they had the foresight of uniting their nations behind a common vision, the common vision that has propelled many nations, even in the West, that we know that for every country to succeed, there must be rallied by a president or a sitting head of state behind one vision, which was Harambee. Let's work together. And it was from that premise that Tanzania, even now, you have over about 100 dialects that are united behind one language, which I can say to you proudly, Kiswahili, which is now has been adopted by UNESCO itself as one of the major global languages. And I had the pleasure of hosting one of the colloquium with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, including some of the top diplomats from Tanzania, Professor Kaya Hassan from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Indigenous Knowledge Systems, including the Ambassador Major General Milanzi here, to say that, guys, you Africans, we have to rally around one language, which is Kiswahili. And we know that it's being adopted by the AU. It has now been adopted by UN. And what you see that you're not seeing maybe people protesting in the Dar es Salaam or in Arusha is because people are being rallied behind one vision and they're still together religiously. They're diverse. If you also study the history of migration, including trades by the Arabs from the east to the south, including here in Cape Town, in the south of South Africa, it emanated from that East Indian company. They started from there. So I think their leaders have really made sure that the issue of cultural diversity is harnessed to the benefit of their own country, despite all the challenges and political differences that they have. But they have the mental to stand as Africans today to say that their legitimate voice to drive this Africa Unity Vision 2016 that we all want, as envisaged within the African Union.
Tshepo Ikaneng, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate the time. Very interesting. International relations media strategist and researcher. Do appreciate the time on Newsfeed.